Have you guys ever thought about hormones and how much they affect your life? Like, have you ever had those major energy crashes in the day, or maybe you're feeling just exhausted and you know you have that low energy and you just can't seem to get rid of it? Well, today, this episode is going to very much help you with that. We have a hormone expert on that is going to teach us what we can do in these simple ways that will be life-changing. So tune in today. You are going to love it. Hey parents, welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. Do you want to raise your kids better and have a stronger marriage? Are you up late at night researching marriage and parenting tools and self-care tips? Do you start each day hoping for deeper connections and less chaos, but it ends with family arguments and going 12 different directions again? My name's Kendra, wife, mom, therapist, and growth enthusiast. It wasn't until I discovered how to fulfill my unmet needs that I was finally able to show up as my best self as a spouse and parent. I realized that by meeting my needs, I could more fully meet the needs of my family with more energy and less resentment. In this podcast, I teach parents skills like boundary setting, prioritizing personal needs, communication, and claiming ownership. Just like my clients, you'll be shocked by the improvement in your marriage, parenting, and personal life when you focus on fulfilling your important unmet needs. Ready to prioritize yourself so you can quit mentally throat punching people? Then grab those earbuds and head outside, and let's rock and talk. Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have an incredible special guest with us, Leisha Drews. She is a mom of 3, an RN, and I'm actually going to let you fill in some of these. She's a holistic hormone coach and the host of Happily Hormonal podcast. She brings a unique understanding of how our body systems work together and how stress on the body and mind impact our overall health. She believes that as women, we can have it all when it comes to health and motherhood. And she loves to help women restore their energy, balance their hormones, and feel good in their bodies again. These are some of the things that she's really passionate about. So thank you, Leisha, for being on the show today and for coming and talking with us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This will be fun.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing? So I gave a little bit of your bio, but do you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself? Something random even?
Yeah. So I went to school to be a nurse right out of high school, essentially, and worked in the hospital about 10 years. And in that time, I got married and had my first couple of babies and really just found out that I was more of a crunchy person than I thought I was, and really started to deep dive into nutrition and health and realized that that was more of the direction that I wanted to go to help people, because I loved working in the hospital for a lot of reasons, because I loved being there for people when they needed me and, providing encouragement and care. And there was a lot that was missing for me where I felt like I wasn't really able to help people get ahead of their health. It was more like essentially like keeping them alive and like keeping up with chronic disease. And so I transitioned about 5 years ago into working with people in general on nutrition and gut health, and then transitioned into hormones shortly after. And so I primarily do work with women on hormones, but we're going to talk to women and men because I do have a few little tidbits in my back pocket that can help men out too. And I happen to have a husband and things like that. So we'll go into all of that, but that's kind of a little bit about me and my, my background as a nurse, and then moved into more of like a holistic health coach as a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner is my formal title. But yes, I have 3 kiddos. We homeschool, and I love being able to do this kind of on the side as everything is, a side as a mom. There's just a little bit of time for everything.
Absolutely. I was actually wondering what that title, the FDNP. I know in our own realm, we always know what it means, but like people don't even know what the initials are after my name either. So that's good to know. Thank you for that little update. I love how you said you are a crunchy person. I feel like the older, not that I'm old, but the older that I get, I feel that way too. Like more of this interest and curiosity about health and how to restore health and energy and all of these things. And more when I'm interviewing people, they're saying the same thing. So I think we're on the same page, like-minded in that regard, and the audience is as well. So I'm so excited to have you answer some questions today. So thank you again. This is going to be great. Maybe you can help me as well. Well, before we jump right into some of those like very specific questions, can you just maybe even just briefly tell me like why hormones specifically? Why are you so passionate about that? I bet you get a lot like, oh, are you really like emotional and crazy? They probably don't say crazy, but yeah, why? Tell us.
Yeah. So when I kind of mentioned, when I moved into holistic health and more of like the functional side of medicine, nutrition versus the more like Western or traditional, I did it because I really cared about people having improved health long term and essentially like getting ahead of those chronic symptoms because I live in Oklahoma. We have a very high rate of diabetes, obesity, COPD, heart disease, like all of the things that you don't want when you're old. We've got them here essentially. And there's lots of reasons for that, lots of lifestyle reasons. And I really wanted to be able to help people ahead of that. So when I first started working with clients like in this more holistic space, I was like, I can help everyone. Everyone needs help with their gut and their nutrition. And to be honest, very true. And I found that what I enjoyed most was working with kids and working with women because my personal story was I was working on health with my kids at that point. And I find that when I work with moms specifically, we change the lives of our families in an exponential way, right? Because we're typically the ones who are going to be more in charge of food, health. Like we're the ones who are researching that typically, not ruling out that some dads are doing that too. Absolutely, it can be. And my husband's very much like on board with my research and loves to know what it is, but he's not necessarily seeking it out himself because he's got other things that he's interested in. So with that being said, why I moved into hormones is because as I started to work with moms, I saw that they're exhausted, low energy, moods are all over the place, bad periods. And most of the time, they essentially just thought that was normal, right? It was like, oh yeah, I've had a couple kids. Of course I'm tired. And this is a huge lie that I hate that we spread as a culture in motherhood is like, of course you're exhausted because you're a mom and you just have to like drink coffee until you can drink wine for the day. And I'm sure you have some thoughts about that as a therapist. There's just like, it seems like it's funny. We joke about it and it's like, oh, haha, like we have PMS or, watch out for mom that week of the month. But like, it doesn't have to be like that. And even when you're in like a postpartum season or you've had a couple kids, like I love to be able to help women actually come out of that because again, the moms can change their family's health, but also like when mom is solid and your mood is solid and you have enough energy, your capacity is 10x, 100x what it could be when you're just trying to survive. And that's huge for, I'm sure every single thing you talk about here is like moms need to have the capacity. And if you feel better and your hormones are balanced, then that's going to give you so much more capacity. So that's really why I moved into hormones is because I love working with women and moms. And that's where they needed the most help.
Oh, yeah. I really appreciate how you said that because I believe this too. You said something like when we help moms, we change the lives of our families in an exponential way. And that is so true. I feel the same way about parents, but it is true. Like moms have such an impact on their children, on their homes, all of those things. So that's incredible. And the other thing I really enjoyed you saying was that lie that we tell ourselves, because I hear this all the time too. Not have a therapeutic take, but that's for another episode. But I love how you said that part, of course you're exhausted because you're a mom. Like it doesn't have to be that way. And that's why I'm excited to have you on to speak to that a little bit more, because I'm sure the listeners are like, well, what are the easy things that we can do so we're not completely exhausted? And how can we fix those hormones? So do you mind if I jump into some of those more specific questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And any dads listening, just know I very much am pro dad. I have a great dad for my kids. I had a great dad. And like your influence is also huge. I just tend to focus on the women. So just know, some of these tips are going to apply to you too. And you don't have to, feel like I'm a man shamer or something like that. Not at all, because both parents are so, so needed for the kids.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think they would think that at all. but they can also support their wives if their hormones are potentially off too. So yeah, no, I think this will definitely apply to both. So my next question for you is, what are some of the most common signs of that hormone imbalance that parents or specifically women might mistake for that everyday stress or exhaustion that we mentioned?
Yeah. So typically what I see when hormones are imbalanced is we see low energy, whether that's kind of like energy dips throughout the day, like that kind of, again, quote unquote normal, like, oh, 3 p.m. I'm tired, or mid morning I'm tired. Those are signs that your stress hormones are off, essentially, that your adrenals need some support. And so when I'm talking about hormones, I am talking about women's hormones, estrogen and progesterone, and we'll get into that. But I'm also talking about stress hormones because those are a huge influence on other hormones that affect cycles as well. So exhaustion is one thing, whether it's like chronic fatigue where you're just tired all the time, or it's these like crashes in energy really often. For women specifically, it's going to be symptoms like really painful periods, heavy periods, a lot of mood swings throughout your cycle, or especially that week before your period that we see again is kind of like told is normal. We all say it's normal because it's like, common essentially. But there is such a difference between what's common and what's normal. And those are all signs that your body is telling you that something is needed. And so my quick little overview on hormones for both men and women, but truly more specifically for women because we carry more of the reproductive weight essentially in our bodies. It's more expensive metabolically and energetically for us to get pregnant than it is for a man to get you pregnant. So our bodies are going to be more sensitive in the hormone space because our bodies need to get the signals that it is safe essentially to get pregnant for hormones to be balanced. And so if you are running on empty, if you're exhausted, if you're in survival mode long term, your body is not going to be prioritizing hormone balance and good periods and good moods because that's not important when your body is being told you're running from a bear, kind of a thing. And so it is different for men because it is not as just like metabolically expensive. Like I said, it doesn't take as much energy. You're not growing a baby for 9 months. You're not feeding the baby with your body. So that it doesn't affect men's sex hormones as much to be under stress. But it is still your adrenals, your brain, and your adrenal glands, which make your stress hormones. They are communicating with your sex hormones really consistently. And so for women, especially, we're going to see big changes in cycles and we're going to see negative cycle symptoms from stress. But for men, we see it more as a chronic thing. Like it gets worse over time versus it's like obvious in the moment typically.
Thank you. That helps a lot. Just talking about like what that looks like. It sounds like it's that low energy, those mood swings, that irregular cycle. So you're telling me, just to clarify, that if we really get our hormones balanced, if we really do some of these things that you'll go into in just a minute, then we won't see as many of those mood swings, that low energy, those energy crashes, those irregular periods, things like that will have, they'll be more stable and consistent. And well, tell me about like a normal baseline of a healthy person. Maybe that's where I should go to. Like, how do you feel when you actually implement these things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I would consider to be normal in a hormone cycle, so we'll start with that for women, but just in a general day for men or for women would be you wake up in the morning and feel refreshed from your sleep. Typically, there's going to be exceptions when your kids are keeping you up. But with that being said, even in seasons where your kids are waking you up a lot, it is possible to be still rested and like still have energy throughout the day to a certain extent. There 2 hours of sleep. No, not so much, but like there is going to be an underlying level essentially of when you have been nourishing your body well, which we'll talk about in a minute, an underlying level of resilience where it's like you have a bad night or two and you're okay versus you have a bad night or two and you're like down for the count for the next 6 weeks, right? Or 6 days or whatever it is. Like we've all been there at certain points. So being able to wake up in the morning, feel rested, be able to go about your day essentially in, I think the most simple way to say it would be like without thinking about your energy, without being like, oh, I need coffee. Oh, I need sugar. Oh, I need whatever. Like where you're just like, maybe you're not bouncing off the walls. Maybe you don't have 2-year-old energy, but like you're not thinking about it. And that's how I feel most of the time with my energy. And if I don't, then it's always a question for me of like, okay, like what changed? Like, did I not have enough nourishment the last couple of days? Did I not get enough sleep? Do I have a lot of stress? Where am I in my cycle? Like those questions come up, and it's not as like a stress thing. It's just like, okay, like I don't feel as good as I usually do. So what do I need to pay attention to sooner so that I don't have this like continue long term? So energy is huge. Being able to essentially get through your day without a bunch of crashes or without just feeling tired all the time. And then being able to sleep well is also huge. And again, this is outside of kids waking you up, but like you go to bed, you're able to go to sleep well, stay asleep all night outside of interruptions that are not from you. And then you wake up feeling rested. Like both of those things are very solid indicators of energy and of stress hormones being fairly well balanced. And then it's definitely mood too. Like if you're depressed, if you're anxious throughout the day, those are indicators. There's a lot, obviously, that goes into that, but they can be indicators just that you're not well nourished and that your body doesn't have reserves and it's running on stress hormones because your blood sugar is imbalanced or because you're not getting the nutrients you need. So those things are all going to affect both men and women. But for women, what I would consider to be normal in a menstrual cycle is truly your period shows up, you bleed. It's not anything crazy. It doesn't change your life. You just have your period. You're not on the couch with pain. You're not exhausted. You're not super moody. You didn't necessarily know it was coming because you had all of these symptoms like hormonal acne or terrible moods or fatigue or cramps or like all of these things that can happen. Like it just shows up. You just bleed. And then about halfway through your cycle, when you're ovulating, you notice some ovulation signs. You may notice a little bit higher social energy, creative energy, romantic energy, like all of those things can peak in the middle of your cycle when you're fertile and ovulating, and then they start to kind of like wind down. But what I like to say is a really healthy menstrual cycle and a sign of great hormone balance for women is that your hormone cycles are like gentle waves on the beach, like a beautiful day at the beach versus like it's a hurricane, right? Or even like a roller coaster. It's like it's the baby roller coaster with the alligator. Like that's how it should be versus like it's the crazy one that you're like scared to go on. You know what I mean? So that would be my indicator of healthy hormones kind of in general. And then one more thing that I will say that people don't typically realize can affect your hormones is if your gut is a mess, if you're having a bunch of gut symptoms, gas, bloating, sorry, everyone, TMI is not a thing for me, but like constipation, diarrhea, like all of that, you're like, okay. Like all of those things are signs that your detox pathways in your body are not ideal. There's probably a lot of inflammation. There's all kinds of reasons we can go into for that, and I won't. But most of the time when I talk to women, I'm like, how are you doing? Tell me about your cycles, tell me about your mood, tell me about your energy. And I'm like, anything else? And they're like, I'm so good. Everything else is good. And I'm like, how's your gut? And they're like, it's terrible. Well, that's not good, So that's a big piece for both men and women is if your gut is a mess, then that is going to affect your energy and your hormones and all the things long term.
I really appreciate so many elements of what you just said. And I couldn't help but thinking about, those key family members, or you always apply it to yourself. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that part because I'm so enmeshed in that mental health space. And I do a lot with that. And yet I often will take my friends or family members, or I suggest to my clients, my mental health clients, hormone doctors. Like so many times when they've gone and got their hormones checked out, they find out there's other physiological reasons that contribute to their mental health, which is why I'm excited to have you on today. But that other component, like it's so much about whole health, right? And you really are speaking to that. And I find that a lot of my clients or family members, they are quick to say stuff like, oh, I have a really irregular period, so I'm just going to get on birth control, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do this. Maybe just like adding more things in that it's not working at that root cause, which goes back to what you were just talking about in the very beginning. What drew you to all this was that preventative healthcare instead of like, let's just keep putting like hundreds of Band-Aids on instead of really figuring out what's going on here.
Absolutely. I see that a lot with hormones is that either it's a current thing or it's a past thing where birth control has been prescribed essentially, like you said, as a Band-Aid. And I'll just make a really quick point on that. I actually am doing all the way through September. We're recording this in September. I don't know when you'll be listening to it, but go back to my podcast for September. I'm doing every episode this month is about birth control kind of in a different way so that you can understand what birth control does in your body, maybe what some of your alternatives are, and just make a really informed decision. So if you feel stuck on birth control for mental health, for acne, for bad periods, any of those things, it would be really helpful for you to understand why it is more of a Band-Aid, and it doesn't do anything to the reasons for the symptoms that you're having, but it can mute the symptoms and it can cover them up and it can make you feel better, which is great. I'm always in support of you feeling better. And we need to know why you're feeling bad, essentially.
Right. I love that. And I'm excited there's other places that we can go. So if people are feeling like they're stuck and not knowing what to do, even after this episode, we'll put your information in the show notes and they can check out those episodes as well. Because it's Happily Hormonal is your podcast. But yeah. All right. So going a little bit more into that, what steps can parents, well, specifically women, so moms, take to start balancing their hormones while juggling the demands of family life? Because we all know that can be a little all-encompassing, right?
Yes, absolutely. It definitely can. And I honestly only really work with women who have all the things going on, whether it's parenting is all the things, or it's parenting and work, or parenting and business. There's always a lot going on. And my entire belief system at this point and what I teach is hormone balance can be simple. We just have to stop going down all these rabbit trails of the things that I would call fancy, which would be like supplements and biohacking and, like all of these random things that were like, oh, if I just do this one thing, if I just do seed cycling, or I just do oil pulling, or I just do a castor oil pack, like maybe that'll fix my hormones. What I typically see is these are the same women who are super busy. They're getting through their day on coffee. They're not eating consistently. They're not eating balanced meals. Even if they're eating healthy and exercising, typically they're underdoing it and overdoing it in one area or the other. And it's causing their stress hormones to be out of whack. And then you feel tired, you feel anxious, you feel moody, and your periods are terrible. And that's just like very much a typical picture that I see. So I'm going to do 2 things that we can change today or tomorrow that will truly make a difference. And I see this change things a lot, and it's not going to change everything for your hormones, but this is where we start. It will help with your energy for sure. What I typically see is that stress hormones are out of control and blood sugar is not balanced. And both those things are going to make a big difference on how you feel in stress. And so my first thing that I want you to change is if you are not eating breakfast within the first hour of waking up, you need to start eating breakfast within the first hour before you drink coffee. I know that's rough for some of us, but it's got to happen. It really helps your body have those signals of safety that say things are safe to focus on hormones and you have nutrients. And then the second step is within that breakfast and your other meals, you need to be getting both protein and healthy carbohydrates every single time. If you're eating whole foods like animal products, animal meats, dairy, you're going to be getting fat in those meals. So protein, carbs, and fat are important, but I find that fat is typically the easiest one to get. For your brain space, I want you to focus on protein and carbs. And I like to start with about a balanced amount. So for example, not less than 20 grams of protein for breakfast, probably a little bit more, maybe 20 to 30. I don't know you. I don't know your energy levels. I don't know, all the things, but my rule is really not less than 20. And then somewhere between 20 to 40 grams of carbs if you're having 20 grams of protein, essentially. So a ratio of like 1 to 1 to 1 to 2 of protein and carbs. Truly, that in and of itself can be life-changing. Eating that within about an hour of waking up and not drinking coffee until after. That can make a huge difference. And then once you have that down for a little while, you can look at your other meals and see, am I getting enough protein throughout the day? Am I getting protein and carbs together? And there is a lot of nuance to this. There can be, and there's so much more we can look at. But my 2 steps for balancing hormones for women are making sure that number 1, you can make hormones well, which means you need the right nutrients in the right combinations at the right times of day for your body to signal that safety and to signal that your body can make hormones well. So it's not making too much estrogen or too little progesterone and causing all these cycle symptoms. And then step 2 is that you need to be able to detox hormones well, because a lot of women are not detoxing hormones well. And then even if they're making the right amounts, things are getting reabsorbed in their bodies, and that can also cause a lot of symptoms. So once we really work hard on the nourishment piece to create the ability to make those hormones well, and those same nutrients can help you detox hormones well, along with some other lifestyle measures. So that's really the main focus. And those are the first 2 steps, is breakfast before coffee, get that breakfast balance and work on your blood sugar balance so that you can create those signals of safety, essentially.
Okay, so I didn't totally understand. So clarify a little bit more if you don't mind. So that first one, I get the eat the breakfast, but the second one, just like succinctly, what's the to do?
So it is making sure you get protein and carbohydrates in your breakfast for sure, and then in the other meals of the day as well.
Okay, so those were like, I combine them together then. So eat breakfast within an hour and then get your carbs and your protein, and that will help tremendously.
And do your coffee after your breakfast.
Well, a lot of our listeners don't even drink coffee, not all of them, but it's we have a big Latter-day Saint base too that don't drink coffee. So, but I'm sure they have like other things that they're doing. Yeah. But my question then for that, piggybacking off of that, I know we're running out of time, but is what about intermittent fasting? Those that do that? Because sometimes I do that. Well, like, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So there are people who will say that intermittent fasting is great for women. What I typically see is my clients do better when they're eating breakfast. So I can tell you that really just like, that's just my personal experience. What I find with intermittent fasting is typically the people who are doing that, they may be doing it very, very intentionally. Sometimes for a while they're doing it intentionally, but what it kind of turns into a lot of times is just not eating enough, not eating regularly, calling it intermittent fasting. A lot of times, maybe not so much for your listeners, but a lot of times it's like drinking a lot of coffee to kind of keep your hunger hormones down. And so I'll go into this just a little bit. The reason that I personally do not like intermittent fasting is when your body is getting less nutrients, especially right away in the morning, you wake up in the morning, your cortisol is highest that first couple hours, and your body needs to know essentially that it has what it needs to start to give you energy for the day. And like, it's going to be always budgeting your energy. And so if in the morning you don't get that signal that yes, there's nutrients here, yes, there's energy here, your body is going to be budgeting and say, okay, we don't have quite enough here. We only have $3 in the account and we need $12 to get through the day. So I'm going to go with the $3 pace all day long because I need to make it stretch, essentially. And so that's obviously a very simple illustration of that, but it's your thyroid function, it's your metabolic function. All of those things slow down if they're not getting the signals consistently throughout the day, and especially in the morning, that nutrients are available. Because historically, yes, people fasted, but like it was because there wasn't food available. It was not because they were just choosing to do it. And again, like I see intermittent fasting, especially a few years ago, it was a big trend and people were doing it really, on purpose, but then they kind of just, a lot of women that I see doing it now, it typically is more of kind of like a habit. And they're like, well, I'm just not hungry in the morning. And it's because you've trained your body not to be hungry in the morning, not because your body doesn't need nourishment. And I see a lot of times with intermittent fasting as well, or just not eating enough on purpose or not on purpose, you're going to have a lot of cravings. You're going to be binging a lot more later in the day, which is going to also be really negative for your metabolism. But if you just eat consistently throughout the day and you keep that blood sugar balance, the cravings go down. You're not actually even eating more calories because you're just getting what you need throughout the day, instead of like starving at lunch, you eat a big lunch, then you're kind of full, and then you eat like maybe a big dinner or a smaller dinner, and then you're hungry at 8 p.m. and then you're eating a bunch of random snacks. And those are not going to be as nourishing almost always as if you had just made a nourishing breakfast in the morning. So I don't ever really see it working well, especially for women. The studies that have been done on intermittent fasting, all of them that I've seen are done for men. Sometimes for men, it can be helpful. But again, men have more of a capability to handle stress on their bodies long term. A lot of times because like they don't have as big of a reproductive, I don't want to say burden, I don't like that term for it, but just like it's not as expensive for them to reproduce. And so that's my take on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You kind of went down another area that we could probably go into for a long time, but I love interviewing different people and finding out their insights and their learning about their expertise in different areas, because yeah, it's such a question mark. Like I went to a functional medicine doctor with a friend even, and I think he just like looked at me and some of the things that I was talking about with my friend, and he said, oh, you need to have your adrenals checked out. And I was like, wait, what? Because I would consider myself a really healthy person, exercise a lot, I eat well. But yeah, there are still those crashes. There are things that are obviously like out of balance enough that requires some investigation. So learning from other people that have more of that expertise is always really helpful. And that kind of brings me to my last question for you today is, if you could go back and do it all over again, like if you could look at yourself as a mother now and all your journey that you've gone through, and if you could go back to yourself as a young mother in the very beginning, what advice would you give to her? Like those small little things that she could do to be her best self as a mother with, especially when it comes to hormones, just all of that. What would you say?
That's a great question. So I told you before we started recording, I just visited my little sister who just had her first baby. So this is very, very much a good question because, for your little sister, you're like, oh, I want you to do everything like better than I did it. Or like, here's what I learned. I was like telling her so many things and I'm like, I need to stop giving her advice. But anyway, I love this question because I think that the number one thing that I would say is I really wish that in my late teens, early teens would have been also great. But at least before I got married, that I really understood what my hormones were doing. Because even though I had gone to nursing school, I did not know what was going on. I had no idea. My cycles were irregular. I was on birth control. I still thought I was pregnant every single month because I was, I got past day 28 and then I didn't even know that my cycles were always 35 days. Like I just was not paying attention. So that's like, some of you be like, okay, well, that was obvious. You should have noticed. Well, I did eventually, but I just didn't know. And I heard so many things, like even from my mom, she's like, oh yeah, in our family, like we sometimes have irregular cycles. It's fine. And like, I was fine, but I had hormonal acne. I had really bad migraines. My periods were painful. And I just wish that I had known that some of that wasn't normal and that there were options other than birth control, because I took birth control several different times for different symptoms, essentially. And when I asked my gynecologist the first time I went there, I was like, I'd like to do something natural for birth control. She said, oh, honey, that doesn't work. And so just having more education. So there's a book called Taking Charge of Your Fertility. I was recommended that book a few times before I actually read it. It's so good for understanding your cycle as a woman, or even as a dad, like helping, like understanding your wife's cycle and eventually your daughter's cycles. It's really, really helpful to just understand how your body works. So that would be my main thing that I wish I had known before I became a mom. And just having the, like, I don't know, the bigger picture view that it's so, so easy as a mom to just like pour out everything you possibly have and to get to a point where you're feeling really empty. And there's going to be sacrifice in motherhood, and that's beautiful. And I think that it really like grows us as people. It grows our character. It grows our relationship with God. Like that is beautiful. And I don't see that as a negative thing. And you can do small things, even in the newborn season, even in the toddler season, to fill your cup. And my side of that is like, eat breakfast, feed yourself when your kids eat. Like those things you can do. Is it hard sometimes? Absolutely. Everything's hard in life, to be honest. And then like also just like going back to that filling your cup, just not losing what you love in motherhood. I'm sure you talk about this, but like maybe you have a list. I've had seasons where I have a list of like, these are things I like to do, because sometimes you forget, right? But it's like when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling empty, it's like, what can I just do to like fill my cup a little bit? Like, oh, I actually really love to go outside and read a book. Maybe I'll just do that for 30 minutes. Will the house fall apart? Maybe it will, but like I will feel better to clean it up. Right. And so it's just those little things sometimes, but I find that when women are nourished, and I'm sure men too, I know this actually from my husband's experience, like when we are nourished, we are so much more solid to be able to see the big picture for our families, to be able to plan, to be able to create, to be able to even just like, problem solve essentially. And so that is something that I wish that I had kind of understood sooner, because I think that I could have enjoyed my early motherhood more and just like had really positive influences around me who were telling me like motherhood is great versus like, oh, just wait till they're this age. I hate that. Wait till it gets bad. Right. So that was kind of a long answer. Sorry.
No, I really appreciate it. I feel like that's a great place to wrap up today, is that little part. I'm all about those micro adjustments, those small changes that we can make. And I love how you said you can do small things to fill your cup. Like we don't have to think so big that we're completely overwhelmed with anxiety and dread for all the things we don't know, all the things we think we should do and have to do and must do, all of the shame around it. But instead we can just focus on those small things. Like I love how you break that down into 2 steps. So just eat breakfast within 1 hour of waking up, and then eat those 20 to 30 grams of protein or 20 to 40 grams of carbs. And that alone will help balance your hormones and help you so that you are not getting those hormone crashes or those mood swings, that low energy crashes throughout the day, irregular cycles, and just like feeling better in general. Did I get all of that right?
Yeah, absolutely. That was great.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Leisha. I really appreciate your insights, your expertise, especially into something that really does affect all of us. Like we really focused on the moms, but as we know, this can also affect men, not just for the hormone part, but what they see, like you said, with their daughters, with their wives. Like this really does affect everybody. So I know it'll resonate with our audience. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
Well, like I said, again, we'll put your links in the show notes if you want to reach out. If you want to find out more about hormone health, go to the show notes and find out that information, reach out to her. And we appreciate you again. Thank you. Hey friends, don't forget to check us out on fulfillmenttherapy.org. We have some amazing things coming up. We are releasing 3 courses. I'm going to be releasing wellness courses, and I'm going to be releasing business courses. So if you've ever wanted to build an online business, I have several courses coming out in the next year. And the first one is going to be released in January, and the first wellness course will be released in January as well. So check it out. You are not going to want to miss it. There are some incredible things. I deliver 10 times what you're hoping for, what you think you're going to get compared to all these courses that I've taken. And I'm going to give you that much more professional help to help you get your life in order. Check it out on fulfillmenttherapy.org and on our social media channels. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you. No matter what your house or your hair looks like, I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.